Hey everybody, happy 4th of July week. This is the Blue White Breakdown on Penn Live. I'm Max Ralph, and you'll notice beside me, if you're watching or if you're listening in the few minutes, that's Johnny McGonigal alongside me and not Bob Flounders. Johnny is back from his international gallivanting, life-changing experience, transformative experience, whatever you want to call it. James Franklin loves the word transformative, so we'll use that one. Let's do that. It sounds amazing. The pictures were amazing, Johnny. But the important thing is, we're glad to have you back on the Blue White Breakdown. We're glad you're here. Bob Flounders has now taken the onus of taking some PTO, so you will not see him at least for another couple weeks. Johnny and I will be busy again on the Blue White Breakdown, the podcasts here. So hope you don't get tired of us, but Johnny, just got to say a big welcome back. Like I said, you're a transformed man now. You've been across the pond. You've seen some great places. So please enlighten us and let us know how happy you are to be back here.
I look, Max, I am happy to be back. It's good to get back into the swing of things. It is nice coming back from a vacation, and then you have the 4th of July weekend
Yeah.
right up against that. So that helps in terms of the acclimating back and getting some good vibes going there. No, happy to be back though. Truly, yeah. Spain and Portugal treated me well. Hit up. We went to Madrid, Barcelona, and Lisbon, and some smaller towns around those major cities. A lot of tapas, a lot of red wine, a lot of good times. A lot of good sightseeing as well. Had a lot of. I mean, it was hot as hell there. I know it was hot as hell back here too.
It was.
So I didn't miss out on the heat wave by any means.
Sure.
Glad we went when we went because I think in Madrid today is 115 degrees. So I mean
God.
yeah, we topped out at like 102, 103. So plenty of water mixed in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it was a very good trip. First time in Spain and Portugal, and had a great time. But I was following from afar. I didn't bring my laptop, but obviously I had my phone and was keeping tabs on what was going on, and specifically Penn State recruiting. And I know they caught a few L's with Joey O'Brien, McKeo, and Kari Adams going to Notre Dame, as well as Luke Wafel going to USC. But some good news over the weekend, though, Max.
Yeah, Johnny. Bold move not taking the computer. Honestly, even if you're not going to use it, I just like to have it with me in case. But I respect the play. I do.
I knew like you're going away for a couple weeks. Like you got to pack as light as you can
Yeah.
and pick your spots. And I opted for the extra like outfit or two in the backpack in case my bag got lost, as opposed to
Yeah.
having a laptop, because I just
Yeah.
knew like I wasn't really going to use it,
Yeah.
and because I knew you and Bob were holding down the fort, and we were going to be all good. A 6 hour time difference would have made things difficult too if I needed to hop in and help. But yeah, no, it was all good.
So, Johnny, you're right. We should recap the month of June in recruiting for Penn State. It was an eventful one, just to put it pretty plainly. Penn State has left June and entered July with 23 commits and ranking, according to the 247 Sports Composite, 10th in the nation. I would say that is probably a step back from where we would have anticipated at least a month ago. If you asked me a month ago to say, where is Penn State's class going to rank on July 1st, probably would have been higher than 10th. Obviously, you mentioned the big losses, and Bob and I have hashed those over and over and over again. They hurt, whatever, but it's time to flush it, move on. Penn State's still going to keep in contact with those guys. But the big thing is they didn't have a disastrous month on the recruiting trail because they were able to go out and get 4-star defensive end Jackson Ford last week. They got 3-star offensive tackle Jack Fuchs. Got to make sure I say that one right. It rhymes with books. I learned that one thanks to the Tennessee Titans, where his dad is the offensive line coach. So Jack Fuchs, a 3-star offensive tackle. And, that was maybe a little bit of a contingency plan for missing out on a guy like Marky Walbridge, who committed to Michigan. Michigan is a little pesky. We can talk a little bit more about that, but Notre Dame caused some problems. Michigan is next on the list right now for Penn State's battles. But they go out and get a couple of solid high upside players at positions of need. And then they also made a surprise over this past weekend in the form of Adam McCann Gibbs, a kicker from Ireland, which that's unique for a lot of reasons because, he's Irish. Penn State hasn't signed international kids other than a few out of Canada like at all in the past few years. And they also haven't signed a specialist out of high school, a scholarship specialist, since 2022 with Alex Paqueta, who is now punting at Rice. So that was an interesting one. Looking forward to. I got in touch with his kicking coach recently, so hoping to get a little more info on him. Maybe I'll have it for Thursday's live pod. But a lot going on. I mean, they started the month. They got commitments from Ben Ezeuka, Amari Polidor. I just think, Johnny, and maybe you can speak a little bit more to this. Like, it was a fine month. There were other things that fans and the Penn State staff certainly would have wanted to see, but all in all, a fine month. And the one I forgot to mention was quarterback Peyton Falzone decommitting and flipping to Auburn. Certainly a lot of thoughts on that as well. But Johnny, if you want to give me kind of your take, your recap, your thoughts on where this is right now and what transpired in the month of June.
Yeah, Max, it's like, I think it's difficult on the defensive line specifically when you look at that group and where they kind of wanted to address things. Obviously, Joey O'Brien and Grayson McKeo, losing them to Notre Dame, two of the top players in Pennsylvania, Joey O'Brien at safety, McKeo at offensive tackle, both out of LaSalle College High School, the same high school that produced Abdul Carter. Penn State went hard on them. They did not get them. But up front on the defensive line is kind of where I'm really looking at and how this class is shaking out, because you had obviously a lot invested in Luke Wafel going to USC, reportedly getting a massive bag to go there. And whether or not Penn State could have competed with USC in that regard, that's tough. That's tough. Losing Carter Meadows, a 5-star defensive end from the region, from Gonzaga Prep, that same school that produced Olu Fashanu, losing him to Michigan, like, that hurts. Even defensive tackles, like you talk Keshawn Stansel, there's some guys on the interior there that they lost out to Southern schools. And so it's not ideal. It's not what you want, but you already had 2 defensive tackles in the door, including Alex Haskell from St. Joe's Prep. And then you go out and you add Jackson Ford, DN from Malvern, who I think is a really good player. And Ohio State was in on him. Michigan was in on him. So it's not like he's some low end 4-star, some contingency or anything. Like, they had a lot invested in him as well. And so to get him in the door was a big deal. But I think overall, you're going into the month of July looking to add some reinforcements in the trenches, both, I would say, at offensive tackle and off the edge.
Yeah. This month, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, defensive line, and even to maybe a little bit of a lesser extent, but a similar amount of focus. The offensive line and the defensive line were huge targets through the month of June. And obviously a guy like Carter Meadows and a guy like Luke Wafel, whom Penn State wanted both of those guys really badly. And those are like top tier guys. Like, if you're able to get those across the finish line, those are the types of players that go into a top 5 class. They can come in and play as a freshman, yada, yada. You miss out on those guys, but it's not the end of the world because you've done your due diligence. You've had eyes on a guy like Ford, who is a really good 4-star defensive end, really projectable traits. He plays both sides of the ball in high school. There's another guy out there, teammates with Carter Meadows, who has yet to commit, but is on the way. And Tyson Harley is his name, another good player, a big body, a guy who can really mix it up off the edge. There's other names like Carter Gooden, who could swing between tackle and end on the D line, but they came into this month with those 2 defensive tackles committed, but no defensive ends because of Daniel Jennings going by the wayside. Hurts a little bit when you leave spring and you get OVs with Wafel and Meadows, and you feel like you still have a shot with those guys and they don't end up coming, but they've made good moves there. There's more coming. And I think that all in all, you feel pretty good coming out of June about where this class is on the defensive line, because Haskell and Isaac Chukura at the defensive tackle position, are both, probably underrated players. Haskell plays in great high school football at St. Joe's, and Chukura in Delaware, maybe not as much, but really projectable traits, has killed camps this summer. He's a good player. So I like what they've done on this defensive line right now. And there are guys who are committed elsewhere as well that they're going to keep tabs on. But obviously you go out and you try and get 2 to 3 at both positions, and they've made good headway to doing that. On the offensive line, It's obviously headlined by Kevin Brown. It has been, and it will continue to be. That kid is just an absolute animal. There's really no other way of putting it. Great piece, but then it's kind of it's more of these guys with the projectable traits, the lower ranking guys. I mean, look, Mikio was a big name that you would have loved to have because you don't necessarily have a guy out on the edge right now that is surefire. Like Kevin Brown could either be on the edge or maybe more likely to move interior when he gets to college. You're looking for a guy like Mikio or a Marky Walbridge who went to Michigan. Like I said, Michigan, a little bit of a thorn in the side with the likes of Walbridge and Carter Meadows so far. But Jack Fuchs is still a good player. Like he's got things that the staff likes. They might have waited for his decision for some other people, but they're taking him for a reason. It's a good player. You've got Roseby Labintis. I'm blanking off the top of my head. Ben Eziuka, who I mentioned already, is a really good player who's flying under the radar. The only thing for him is that his size is maybe a little bit of a question as to whether he can stay on the outside as a tackle or move inside. But I promise you, the feedback on him is really good. He has great footwork. Talk to his high school coach. There's a story coming soon. I believe the anecdote he gave me was he was like a dancing bear because his feet are so good, which was awesome. And I loved every bit of that. So it's different. Like, I think the bottom line is it's different than what we thought it was going to be standing at this point, but it's not bad by any means. And there are still pieces out there that are going to keep this in the top 15, top 10 range of classes nationally.
Yeah, overall, like I still think they're in a pretty good spot. Like, it hurts to lose. Well, not lose because you never had them, right? But to miss out on, players like O'Brien and McKeo from outside Philly, to miss out on Wafel from New Jersey, to miss out on Carter Meadows from the DC area, like losing your and Kari Adams as well from Maryland. So to miss out on the big fish and their big regional fish, that hurts. To see Marky Walbridge and Meadows commit to Michigan and the three Notre Dame guys to go to the Irish, like that hurts. But I think looking ahead, we talk about offensive tackle, like Marlon Bright is one, from DePaul Catholic from, in New Jersey, 4-star guy, announcing his commitment this weekend. Penn State looks to be in a strong position there. You mentioned Tyson Harley, the 4-star defensive end, teammate of Carter Meadows at Gonzaga Prep in DC, announcing his commitment this weekend. Penn State looks to be in a good position there. And if they're able to add Tyson Harley to the mix, then you have him and Jackson Ford, 2 4-star defensive ends committing in back-to-back weekends. Changes the perception of that defensive line group in this 2026 class pretty dramatically in a matter of just a handful of days. Dorian Barney, corner from Georgia, who was originally from Pennsylvania. We've written about him before. Yeah. Penn State was on him heavy. He's looking like it could be Michigan. And so if that's the case, losing 3 guys to the Wolverines that you really wanted would also hurt. But overall in this class, they're at 23 members right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they get to 25 by the end by the end of July, or 26. And then you're looking at probably 27, 28 overall in the class, seeing if they could flip a guy or two. One thing I want to talk to you about, Max, you mentioned Peyton Falzone flipping to Auburn, because now, we're talking about I think without that, we would have just entered July thinking trenches, and fortifying on the defensive and offensive lines. But now, Troy Hun is your only quarterback in the class. And I think they were really happy with the fact that it was going to be a 2-quarterback class. Mm-hmm. Now it's a matter of, okay, how many top 25 guys are out there? If you want to add another quarterback into the mix at this point in the cycle, like there's not that many guys out there. You're probably looking at a flip of some point in terms of uncommitted guys not allowed out there. And that's difficult too, because you have Troy in the class already. So it's not like you're desperate for a quarterback. You're going to, really, invest a quarterback because you already feel like you're decent there. But I'm just interested to see how the recruitment of potential quarterbacks go and in which direction they go really over the next couple months.
Last year, it was fairly similar in the sense that Beckham Kritza was committed for, such a long time, but then they go in and right around signing day, North Carolina fires Mac Brown, and Bryce Baker all of a sudden is all over Penn State feeds and whatnot. Like that was a high level guy that Penn State thought they had a chance to flip, got him on campus and everything. And it didn't end up happening. I'm not sure it's the exact same situation because I think everybody knows. I think the staff knows. I think Beckham Kritza knows. I think fans know that he is a project piece through and through. Troy Hun is in a little bit of a different place. He's got really good measurables. He's got a great arm. As he camped this summer, he got the invite to the Elite 11, did not place in the Elite 11. I heard that, there were some things that they wanted to see at Elite 11 as far as, anticipation, moving on from mistakes, et cetera, that he didn't quite show yet. But the measurables are there, and he is a more polished prospect than Beckham Kritz ever was. There's a reason Penn State went out and got him so early in the cycle last summer. They're very confident in Troy Hunt. That's the bottom line. But if the opportunity presents itself, Johnny, I would not be shocked in any way to see another quarterback targeted or even eventually added to this class. I asked James Franklin about it in the spring, of course, in a little bit of a sly way because you can't say names of recruits. But I asked him, I said, why do you target two quarterbacks in a class? What factors go into that? And he said, well, we want them to be different styles first and foremost, and we want to make sure that there's competition, and we want to make sure that everybody's okay with it. So if they go and they target another quarterback, they're going to talk to Troy Hunt about it, but they're also probably going to look for a guy who can run a little bit because Troy is very much more of a pocket passer type of quarterback right now in his build. He's big body, and Peyton Falzone was that. Obviously, they don't have him anymore. So I think if they go after somebody, it could be a situation like Bryce Baker last year, finding a top guy who just so happens to become potentially available and make a run at him. Or it could be like a Jackson Smolik from a couple years ago where, he showed up late in the camp circuit and Penn State was looking for a guy and they were impressed by him and said, okay, he's got a lower level commitment right now. We can probably bring him up to the Big Ten. And so, that's kind of what you're looking for. You're either getting lucky on a top level guy or you're going down and you're looking for a guy who has good traits down to a little bit of a lower level commitment right now. Because like you said, aren't really many top 25 guys out there right now who are just sitting uncommitted, right?
Exactly. And just a couple of things to add on the quarterback conversation. You mentioned, having different styles, different playing styles with these guys. The last time Penn State took two quarterbacks in a class, it was Drew Aller and Bo Pribula, and those two guys are very different in terms of their playing styles, as we saw, it all play out at Penn State. Another thing that we saw play out was Bo eventually transferring.
Yep.
And understanding that in today's college football, generally, but more specifically with quarterbacks, that's a very real possibility of losing one of your quarterbacks. And you're looking at this quarterback room now, and Drew is going to be gone after this upcoming season. And then we're going to have a competition, right, between Ethan Gronkmeyer and Jackson Smolik. And if one of those guys feels like they're not going to win that quarterback competition, and, at this point, I don't mean to discount one over the other, but I would, just in terms of projecting, look at Ethan Gronkmeyer when he signed as the future quarterback of this program. If Smolik or even Beckham Kritza were to transfer, after this season, then if you only have Troy in the 2026 class, you're pretty thin at quarterback. You are thinner than you want to be at quarterback. And so I'm interested to see, and the solution to Peyton Falzone flipping, like you mentioned, Max, might not come in the next month. This might be more of a closer to signing day kind of thing. We'll see, right? We'll see. But I think that's something to keep in mind as well, because I think James Franklin and Danny O'Brien and, the entire staff, they felt comfortable having two quarterbacks because of what could transpire in the 2026 offseason. Having two guys in, given everything, given where this room is right now, I think was a real benefit and a real peace of mind kind of thing. And right now they don't have that.
Exactly. Falzone's an interesting one because he's an athlete that Penn State loved. I mean, the kid can run. He's got really good track numbers. He's 6'4". He's got fantastic size, and he's just kind of a football guy. His dad's the coach over at Nazareth. I talked to both of them. Smart kid. Definitely a player that Penn State would love to have in this class. But when they first offered him, they were not sure that he was a quarterback. They needed to see a lot of improvement. That's when he started to go work with Brad Mandler, who obviously is worked with Drew Aller and Ethan Grunkemeyer, and both of them done a really good job. Penn State trusts him. Falzone started to make a lot of those changes. They saw good things, but I think there was a commitment in the Falzone camp's mind between him and his family that he wanted to be a quarterback at the next level. Penn State had told him when he committed in April that they would take him as a quarterback, but without knowing anything behind the scenes, this could be a play where Auburn doesn't have a quarterback committed in that class. He wants to go in and he wants to compete right away to be a quarterback, and that's kind of what leads to the flip. Like, he's a really good athlete. Maybe he's not as polished a quarterback as Troy Hunt is, and if he sees the writing on the wall as far as quarterback goes, that could be what led to this. And it really was out of nowhere. I mean, like, this was not expected by any means, because like I said, regardless of whether he ended up as a quarterback or switched to a tight end or whatever, Peyton Falzone was a guy that Penn State would have loved to have in this class because he's a great athlete. But it's tough in today's day and age to sign two quarterbacks because the transfer portal exists. If you can't get playing time right away to school, you can start out at a lower level, get playing time, impress, and then move up to a better school. It's tough to sign two guys in a class. And so it's a difficult situation for Penn State and for the Falzones, who I'm sure were pressured in some way by Auburn to, make that flip. That's just how this industry works these days. But it's a reality. And now I do think it's likely that Penn State will look for another quarterback in the 26 class, because the other part of this that we haven't even talked about, but you can't go out and really get a transfer quarterback and tell them you're coming in to be a backup. Like, if Ethan Grunkemeyer is your starter next year and you're pretty confident in that, or even if it's Jackson Smolik, you can't go out and get a transfer to just be a backup. There's no reason for that in today's day and age, because even if you go down to FCS, there's 300 D1 football programs out there that need a starting quarterback, and they're going to go find their guy. If you're transferring, you're not doing it to be a backup. So I think that's why you can probably bank on Penn State trying to get another 26 quarterback.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add on that too. You talk about, hey, if you're coming in to be a backup as a transfer quarterback, well, if it's Grunk, and he's going to be the starter in his third year at Penn State, then if all goes well, he's the foreseeable starter, right? Like, unless he has just an absolute, say he starts in 2026 and in his third year, he goes off and then he goes to the NFL, like, you're probably looking at a 2-year starter in him. And so then the timeline to playing time, the path to playing time is just not that great. So it's not all doom and gloom necessarily.
No.
With Falzone going, like, I understand. Like, I was a little surprised too. I told you I was keeping the push notification. I had your push notifications on to still keep tabs while I was over there. The Falzone one was surprising, like seeing Penn State on the recruiting side of things, like how that all panned out. Like, not totally surprised, with O'Brien and McKeo and Adams, et cetera, et cetera. But I was surprised about Falzone. But then you look into it, you think about it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense, right? Like, Auburn didn't have a quarterback in their class, and for a guy who went through his recruitment being like, are you a quarterback? Are you a safety? Like, we don't really know. Like, okay, fine. Like, you'll be a quarterback. Like, to take that assurance and to be able to play in the SEC, like, totally understand. But it does put Penn State in a little bit more uneasy of a spot than it was, just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. To look ahead, just to kind of wrap this up, I think we covered everything we wanted to get to. Like, I think it's still, Johnny, I think it's still offensive line and defensive line to finish out this class. They're pretty set at linebacker. Running back, maybe. I mean, Brian Bonner's a name that's come up a lot, but Messiah Mickens is there. I mean, we've talked about that. It's not a need, might be a want. I think the biggest needs remaining are really just in the trenches. Potentially another corner or safety, defensive back in general. Even then, it's not really a need because they've got high numbers at that spot, at both of those spots, that is. So, it's just a couple of big pieces on the trenches that they still need to fill out. And, and then I think it's pretty good from there. But, before you know it, Johnny, Big Ten Media Days are going to be upon us, and we're going to be starting in at Penn State Fall Camp. So it's pretty crazy, but it's almost here.
I know. One quick thing. I want to apologize to our listeners because I had an email notification go off in the middle of the podcast, a little ding. Yeah. And you know what? Hand up. I'll be better. I was like, Bob and I remember during the season, I think a couple popped off and we got a comment or two on it. And I had become so good about just, exiting out of my Outlook email
Yep.
before we hopped on the podcast. And 2 weeks out of practice, I'm not in midseason form right now, but we'll be better. On Thursday, we'll have our live podcast
That's
as
right.
we always do over the Blue White Breakdown. Noon on Thursday before the holiday weekend fully kicks off. So I will be sure to have my email turned off then.
Yeah, got to get into midseason form. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Like Johnny said, Thursday live, it's coming. Please send us some questions, whether ahead of time. You can find our emails online. You can shoot us a DM on Twitter, anything. Shoot us some questions. Come join us in the live chat. It's fun. It's better when there's interaction. Come join us. Appreciate y'all listening to this recorded podcast as well. Take care.